So, does a debut album from a new style of music still hold up so well after all these years?
Are you ready?
No, we are not ready. Looking back at music with hindsight, it's easy to see trends come to be. On a previous episode of Retro Reviews, I called the 18th of August 1998 the most important day for nu metal, and that was because it was the day we saw Korn drop Follow the Leader, along with Kid Rock's Devil Without a Cause and Candy Ass by Orgy. I would say that the 10th of October 1994 is perhaps the second most important day for the genre. I know Rage Against the Machine gets mentioned a lot for helping create the nu metal genre, which the band have apologized profusely for, but f**k them. And while their influence is undeniable, they aren't the main driving force. In fact, I'd argue they were more of a first gear in a gearbox, and Korn is the engine of the scene. Korn is to nu metal as Metallica is to thrash metal, as the Ramones were to punk, as Black Sabbath was to heavy metal. The true innovators of the genre that for the time didn't even have a name yet, and that brings us to Korn's debut album. An album that would serve as a blueprint for up-and-coming artists who all wanted to be like Korn and emulated their sound, but always fell short. Still, the band had an origin, and that's pretty well documented. Before lead singer Jonathan Davis began his musical career, he was a coroner, even dropping out of high school for his new profession at the age of 16, and he would eventually become an embalmer. This would cause him to have post-traumatic stress disorder from seeing many young kids and even babies coming through the morgue. In high school, he was part of a group called Buck Naked, which recorded 2 songs, and later he would end up joining a group called Sex Art during his time in college. He would also go on to perform with them over the next few years. As for James Schaffer, aka Monkey, Reginald Avisu, aka Fieldy, and David Silvera, they were all part of the band LAPD, and after this group broke up, they would add Brian Welch, aka Head, to their lineup for a new group called Creep. However, they were without a singer until they witnessed Jonathan Davis while he was performing with Sex Art and were blown away by his performance. In turn, they would enlist Davis for their band as their lead singer, and eventually they would decide to rebrand themselves, and while thinking of a band name, the suggestion came up for Korn, spelt correctly in the first place. Instead, Head would rework the title to be spelt with a K and a backwards R, and this is due to the way Toys R Us had designed their logo, as many of the members were actually working for the company at that time. To their own acknowledgement, the band name was dumb, but once they would get established, it would make them cool. And I think it has stood the test of time, just like Motorhead did back in the day when they put umlauts over theirs. The band members eventually moved into a house together in Huntington Beach, California to start recording a demo album. While they were here, they would often perform small sets and attracted crowds of people, citing that the band had sounded so different for this scene and truer words have never been expressed. Eventually the band would put out a demo, and this contained a few tracks that would end up being on their debut album. The band would eventually be spotted by several record execs, but ultimately went with Immortal as they didn't want to give away their creative freedom. With a bit of capital behind them, they would inquire if Ross Robinson would produce their album, as he also did their demo, and he agreed, suggesting they would move to Indigo Ranch, Malibu to record it. Now, Ross Robinson is certainly now a well-established producer who has worked with the likes of Sepultura, Limp Bizkit, Soulfly, Slipknot, Machine Head, At the Drive-In, and Dead Cross. But for the day, he had only recorded Fear Factory's demo album Concrete, but this worked in their favour. They knew he had their best interests at heart. So as you can expect with a bunch of young musicians, it was more or less an orgy of debauchery, and a perfect example is how the song Bald Tongue was recorded while Davis was high on meth. To quote him here, "I got a big old fat rock of meth, chopped that shit up, and I did the vocals. All that crazy scattering shit, that was from me probably being up too long." In fact, the band members often slept in the studio after getting extremely drunk, and Head would sleep in the vocal booth because it was the coldest place in there during the summer, and they didn't care about comfort due to being extremely drunk. Lastly, we have to talk about this iconic album cover, which shows a very decryptic photo of what appears to be a Slender Man looking person staring at a young girl in a playground. It was extremely symbolic for what the band had to offer and their eerie sense of music. The photographer for this cover was Steven Sticker, and the child on the cover, Justine Ferrara, was a member of Korn's extended family, the niece of Immortal Records rep poor Pontius. She was paid $300 for the gig and her swinging skills, and Pontius was in the doghouse with the family due to her parents not being keen on being recognised in public and tied to this band or record. Ferrara would confirm in 2013 that she thought it was cool, and she ended up getting some modelling work after the record. Sounds like she was grateful for her contribution to the album. Take note, Spencer Eldon. Most of the album was recorded with all the band members playing simultaneously, as opposed to being in separate rooms doing separate sections, and you can hear it on this effort. I think it worked better this way. Singles. For this album, there were 4 singles that were recorded, and they are as follows. Okay, let's state the obvious. Blind is one hell of a way to kickstart your career, and it's perfect as the opening song for this album. The rhetoric by Jonathan Davis semi-screaming at us is perfect to show off what we are in for. The song was written all the way back in 1992, while Davis was in his earlier band Sex Art, but he would rework this song for Korn's debut album here, and it has changed, but kept the core elements. This led to a lawsuit by his former bandmates, claiming that they had helped write this tune, and in turn, they were included as songwriters along with the rest of Korn for it. The song itself is about drug issues, mostly dealing with amphetamines, and was very easy for Jonathan Davis to write, as he had a long history with addiction until he would go sober for the first time during the tour for this record. The song also seems to be having a slight resurgence on TikTok, which would take longer for me to explain than rather show you a few examples. This is the most played track off their debut album, and it's not even a close second with any other song, so it makes sense that this track has been a constant song in their live setlist. It's easy to see why this single helped catapult the band into the charts and helped sell 2 million copies of this album in America. Another interesting aspect is that they used Blackie Lawless's guitar from the band Wasp, because Korn were in the same studio as Wasp, and they would often use their equipment after they had gone home, so I guess that's a weird degree of separation for you. This track is easily the most overlooked single in Korn's history. I mean, can you actually recall this song without the intro I just played you? Don't get me wrong, it's one hell of a song, but it has easily been lost over the past 30 years. The song was actually recorded for their demo tape under the title Alive, along with the tracks Predictable, Blind, and a shorter version of Daddy. In 2015, Jonathan Davis would also state in an interview the song's subject matter was based around Amy Echo of the band Human Waste Project, and while they were really good friends back in the day, they never hooked up. Wordplay, huh? It seems something is very disturbed within this tune. Right from the onset of those bagpipes, we know something is up in the air before landing on those riffs, and it feels at this stage rather synonymous with the band to include so many nursery rhymes performed in this nefarious manner. Songs that are so ingrained and wrapped in our childhood, now absolved with a dark and sinister deliverance. It's quite the genius move to not only rework these tunes to the band's style, it also helps us in a way being brought down to Jonathan's level for this twisted innocence and emotional journey that comes later on this album. For reference, the nursery rhymes incorporated in this song are Ring Around the Rosie, London Bridge is Falling Down, and Mary Had a Little Lamb. There are also a few curious sections within the song regarding the odd mumbling vocal tracks in the background, so I have prepared a surprise to you in my post-edit. That is Jonathan Davis saying this is madness over and over again.
This is madness!
Hey, it might have been an old trick, but it's always been a classic move in the metal community. Also, the bagpipe intro to Chutes and Ladders was recorded with Davis being outside the studio, walking away from the mic. And if you have heard how loud those things are, then you can understand why they did this. If you are unaware of Clown, it is a song that takes its inspiration from events that happened during a live performance by the band, and joins a long list of other iconic songs that have been influenced under the same series of events, such as Metallica's Master of Puppets or Black Sabbath's Fairies Wear Boots. The event in question was when a skinhead was shouting "Go back to Bakersfield" during one of their gigs, and when Davis knelt down to hear him, the guy took a swing. This is where the line "Hit me, clown, because I'm not from your town" originated from. Interestingly, the video clip for this song, along with Blind and Chutes and Ladders, was directed by McGee, who would also go on to direct various other music videos for The Offspring and Sugar Ray, and also the video clip for Got the Life. He also directed the first two Charlie's Angels movies and the TV show Chuck. So that's your trivia done. I could name a few tracks here, like Ball Tongue or Faggot, as deep cuts, and while solid songs, I would be lying to you, because there is only one deep cut worthy of being mentioned for this section, and every Korn fan out there knows exactly what song that is.
I'll be your daddy.
Now, if you know, you know, or IYKYKORN as the kids would say. This deep cut is no surprise to any Korn fans worth their salt, because once you have heard this song in full, you can't unhear it. It is a very twisted and emotionally draining song to listen to, especially considering its subject matter, raw emotion, and duration, with the song lasting over 17 minutes in length. So if you are still in the dark about this one, get yourself a chair, because this gets heavy, and not in a traditional heavy metal kind of way. Instead, the song deals with being sexually abused as a kid, and is told from the first-hand account of Jonathan Davis himself. Now, first things first, even though the song was called Daddy, that wasn't who abused him, and this is a very common misconception surrounding this track. Yes, we can see why this may be confusing. Instead, it was the neighbour in this instance, and one of the failings surrounding this incident is how Davis told his parents, who thought he was either lying or joking, so they never took him seriously. No, I'm not going to quote the lyrics to this song, which are extremely raw and purposefully vivid, but I will say that Ross Robinson managed to get on tape perhaps the most emotional performance out of any singer of the last 30 years. I mean, this song just goes into very dark territories, but when they were recording it, he clearly broke down a mental barrier he made to protect himself, and what we hear is something typically reserved for the privacy of a psychiatrist's office space when they make this kind of breakthrough. Only this happened during the song. Now, if you were curious, the band knew nothing about the history of Davis's past, so when he authentically started sobbing uncontrollably in the recording studio mid-performance, they nearly came to a stop, only to be spurred on by Ross to keep on going. After the song was completed, there was a moment in the studio where the band was no longer just a band, but instead became brothers as they all surrounded and embraced Jonathan during his time of pain. This song was recorded in 2 takes, with the second take being the one we hear on the record. Unsurprisingly, this song has rarely been played live, as it was too much to handle back in the day. He has buried the past along with the person who inflicted the damage to him. Interestingly, this song has been covered by a few YouTubers as a reactionary clip, mostly by non-metalheads, and needless to say, I believe their reaction says it all when it comes to this song. For what is essentially an extended demo, this album does its job quite well, and I can understand why it was so endearing for the younger generation. It was different, and it was new. It was music that would assault your eardrums while leaving the listener in a cathartic nature. It was deep, it was emotional, and it was extremely hard-hitting and heavy, not in the metallic sense. You could have had the shittiest day in your life, and just blast this album at full volume to escape, and you know this album would do so for many people. It was also the change that was required at this time in the music scene, and the timing was perfect, as most iconic records have had. The grunge era was casting off and instead being replaced with a new era of punk and metal. This album, along with the release of Machine Head's debut only a few months prior, helped set the scene and prove metal could survive after a tumultuous few years, or at least that's how some people describe the early 90s era of metal. I don't entirely agree with that ideology, especially considering some of the best records were made around about this time. However, Korn's blending of funk meets metal was not quite original, especially given that other bands such as Faith No More or Living Colour were around, but it was exacerbated by the group who managed to take the extremes of both genres and seamlessly blend them into an album that seems inaccessible, but was really a great way to explore this bloody field of bludgeoning and bombastic bands with certain extremes. To an extent, this record may have served as the gateway album for most, and I imagine it's in a similar vein to what Slipknot did less than a decade later. It contains catchy songs while airing fresh scars from a dangerous and dark past. It was not only cathartic for the listener, but also for the band itself and their past traumas, and perhaps save them in the process. Upon the initial release, it would receive some mixed to positive reviews, with Kerrang given a score of 4 out of 5, Los Angeles Times given a 2 out of 4, Hard Rock given a 7 out of 10, The Village Voice given a C-, and Vox given a 6 out of 10. This shouldn't be any surprise, really, as many outlets would end up changing their views on the music, either because it became famous, or because they had dismissed the notion initially only to come to their senses eventually. In retrospect, the scores for this debut album are mostly positive, with AllMusic giving the album a score of 4.5 out of 5, Blender a 4 out of 5, The Complete Guide to Heavy Metal an 8 out of 10, Encyclopedia of Popular Music given a 4 out of 5, Crane given a perfect score of 5 out of 5, Great Rock Discography given a score of 9 out of 10, Music Hound Rock given a score of 3 out of 5, Rolling Stone Album Guide given a 2 out of 5, and Sputnik given a score of 4 out of 5. Over at Rachel Music, the score for this record sits at 3.46 out of 5 from nearly 13,000 reviews. As for me, I would give this album a score of 12.5 million chilies on the spicy scale, with my favourite tracks being Blind, Clown, Chutes and Ladders, and Daddy. Of course, the Rolling Stones would fuck up their score yet again. They have a really good record of doing this, but whatever. This might not be Korn's finest hour, but it was their most iconic. Yeah, Korn unintentionally started something that was perhaps ahead of its time, and perversely mirrored by other bands in such a way that the genre itself has aged like fine milk that's been left out on the porch on a hot summer's day. This debut album became the mold for what new metal should sound like, and so many bands tried to emulate this debut record, usually falling short in the process. Deftones failed to capture it on Adrenaline, and Mudvayne failed to capture it on The Beginning of All Things to End. In my opinion, the reason both of these albums fail is because of the drums on each of these records. Sure, there is a certain guitar tone that is extremely similar across these three albums, but it's mostly that drum sound that everyone was trying to go for, and due to either piss poor production or lack of funds to buy a real drum kit in the end, the same result becomes apparent. Both albums' drumming tracks almost sound as bad as Metallica's Saint Anger. Yep, I said it, it's out there. Both of these albums are unlistenable because of their drum sound, and it sucks. I think the closest any band came to recapturing that sound for their debut album would have been Limp Bizkit with their album $3 Bill Y'all, and it's for obvious reasons that they came so close. After all, it was Korn who launched Limp Bizkit into stardom and helped with their first album, even teaming them up with the same producer they used on their debut album, Ross Robinson, to work on that record. And before you bitch and moan, don't forget that he did the first three albums with Slipknot, and that's why I didn't mention them. They understood what it took to record a debut record, capturing that raw passion without sacrificing too much in the production, and it all paid off. Korn's debut album would end up becoming the new metal equivalent of Master of Puppets, and was a calling for all the new acts. Get on my level or fall short, and we all know how this ended. If you've enjoyed this content, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to us, and stay notified for future music related content, because it keeps our manager happy at the end of the day. We are also on Discord, Instagram, Facebook, and all those other social platforms if you want to check us out. As always, people, you have a great day and stay spicy.